Thank you for your kind introduction. I'm really pleased to be invited as a speaker to this conference on regional cooperation and integration. And I'm going to try to share some insights on promoting sustainable agribusiness value chains and food security through the lens of regional cooperation and integration. I understand the proceedings of this conference will feed into the finalization of the mid-term review of OP7. And as you all know, the OP7 mid-term review is taking place against a backdrop of some macroeconomic imbalances and turbulence. The growth deceleration that we are seeing in this region and elsewhere, the soaring food prices, and the worsening sovereign debt outlook. So all this makes the backdrop really challenging, and it's arguably putting some pressure on regional cooperation. Part of this is owing to geopolitical tensions, as Emma mentioned, and in particular the Ukraine crisis and the shockwaves it sent into the commodity markets, the food, the fuel, the fertilizer. We are really seeing the effects of these turbulences. Some of them will be lagged, like the fertilizer issue, which will really play out in future crops, and this could sustain the food inflation for some time to go. And we also have to keep in mind that the pandemic is still with us, so the lingering effect of the pandemic and also playing a role in the overall landscape against which this regional cooperation is being reviewed. We are really, when it comes to agriculture and food security, we are seeing some reverse into the poverty and nutrition outcomes in the region. We recently published the SOFI report, the State of Food Security with sister agencies in Rome, and we are seeing the number of malnourished, undernourished people edging up. So this is really a worrying effect and something that we need to keep in mind. But it's really difficult to talk about shared prosperity when we have such a big number of people struggling to get food and struggling to get decent livelihoods. So this is really a big challenge. So we believe that the regional cooperation is really the needed answer, because many of the challenges are transboundary. If you look at this health issue, if you look at what's going on commodity markets, if you look at the more structural issues about climate change, which is expressing itself through the water cycle with droughts, floods, and other extreme events. So it looks like we are really dealing with a series of transboundary issues, and a single country cannot arguably really tackle those issues on its own. So it's really difficult to talk about food security in isolation, and the model that we all have as IFIs dealing with countries, these are the building blocks of our portfolios, needs also to evolve to take into account this tendency about issues transcending the boundaries of countries and becoming more and more impactful. Just want to mention the issues about animal health, which is also another issue that we need to take into account when we deal with food security. You all know about the African swine fever outbreaks that started in 2019, and they have really wreaked havoc into the swine industry and decimated herds everywhere in the region. And this has been one of the triggers of the food inflation. We tend to focus more on the Ukraine crisis, but there are also structural issues like this zoonoses and animal health issues, which require collective action. I think this is another example which reminds us of the importance of the regional cooperation and integration when it comes to food security. Another issue which we've seen recently is the tendency of some countries to put in place trade policy measures like export bans with the aim of safeguarding their own food security and then cushioning the population. But this is also triggering issues in other countries. We all know the issues about palm oil in Indonesia and the wheat sector and the decision of the Indian government, for instance, to halt exports. So all these issues, which are sovereign decisions, have implications on the overall regional situation, and they need to be taken into account. So all this calls for collective action. And as I said, the notion that one country can really single-handedly deal with these issues is really utterly false. So I was asked to look into future directions, and I'd like just to offer a few thoughts from the IFAD perspective. As an international financial institution with about $9 billion of investment committed to this region, and with a strong partnership with the Asian Development Bank, we have really a significant portfolio of co-financed projects. We have really a strong stake into the regional cooperation and integration agenda spearheaded by ADB. So we would like to offer a few thoughts. And I really liked the direction about thinking about FCI action plan as being wider, deeper, and more open. I would add quicker, because we need to accelerate regional cooperation and integration. We don't have the luxury of time, I think, with all the setbacks I mentioned and the suffering that many rural inhabitants are really experiencing these days. We need to get quicker to regional integration. So while we can deepen and open, we can think about the depth and breadth, but we need to think about the speed. I think that's an element that I invite ADB colleagues to look into. Let me just say a few words about how IFAD is really addressing this FCI agenda, and then offer a few thoughts on the future directions. We have what we call the regional program window, which offers us the possibility to engage with many of the groupings in the region, like the SAARC, the ASEAN, but also the Pacific Island Forum. And so I think this instrument, in addition to our investment program, allows us really to build the capacity, advocate for common issues, and then support some of the countries to come with a single voice when it comes to climate change negotiations, and really putting agriculture and food systems front and center in the negotiations. So we really supported many of the small island development states in the last COP to really advocate for putting agriculture really on top of the agenda when it comes to climate negotiations. So these are a few examples that we are working on. We're working with SAARC on the climate smart agriculture and how we can scale it up and mainstream it across the region. We're also working with the ASEAN Secretariat on trade policy issues and how we can ensure integration in certain value chains in the region. So some ideas on how we can bring this agenda forward. I think we need to probably put in place, as an AFI, instruments which would allow us to engage with several countries simultaneously. We all have these regional landing instruments. We know that they are difficult to put in place, and oftentimes they end up into separate tracks and separate projects. I think if we can come up with incentives to ensure that countries will come together to borrow for transboundary issues, that would be a breakthrough in the FCI agenda. It's more easy on the grant element because we are able to put in place grant-funded multi-country initiative, but it's more difficult when it comes to loans. And I think that's something. I didn't hear through this discussion South-South and triangular cooperation. This is a modality that we are using, and we triangulate capacity, expertise, know-how among countries. And this is something that might be of interest for the FCI agenda in this region. We also need to ensure that the transition from the COVID response to recovery is really coherent. A lot of publications dealing with these regions have noted the multi-speed and divergent recovery pathways. And as we try to recover from COVID, and when it comes to agriculture, there are many lessons that we can really share among these countries to ensure that there is a coherent response and that they can build back better in a collective manner. So that's something I would single out as one of the issues that we need to work on, in particular how to ensure that safety nets are really expanded swiftly, but also productive safety nets are also expanded. So to conclude, I would like to say that FCI, when it comes to promoting sustainable value chains and food security, is a public good, because food insecurity is a public bad, and I think if we work collectively for food security, water security, and ensuring really decent livelihoods, that's a public good. That's a global public good, and if we put in place all the instruments, we can really achieve it. So it's not a luxury. It's something that we need to put in place. I see that my time is up. So I think that's the key message I would like to share with you, is that this is not a luxury. This is something that needs to be mainstreamed in our work, and we need to be bolder and act quicker on this agenda. Without further ado, I'd like just to hand over to my colleague, Takashi, who will talk about the ADB's operations and agriculture value chain developments, both at the investment and policy levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim.